We have been gathered here to celebrate, to acknowledge the partnership of faith-based institutions and our public officials. We are grateful and thankful for their presence. We're thankful in particular for Mount Airy Baptist Church and the partnership with Optimus so that we can do our part to make sure that testing is done in these communities. Well, I am thankful for Pastor Kathy Williamson, who has coordinated with Senator Marilyn Moore to make sure that we have adequate testing in this community. And now, it is my honor to introduce the governor of this state of Connecticut, Governor Ned Lamont.
Hey, Pastor, thank you, and Mayor, good to be with you, and Marilyn, thanks for helping to get this inspired and organized. Just give you briefly the update on where we are. It's sort of our COVID report. A little mixed. Our hospitalizations went up just a little bit. That's the first time that's happened in many, many weeks. It's not something I'm worried about because it's going up from a terribly low base. There wasn't much further. More importantly, I think, is the fact that our testing went up and our rate of infection continues to be very low. Less than 1% of the people we tested tested positive. And I don't think that's happened in a long, long time. And I'm really proud of the state of Connecticut. I'm proud of the folks wearing the masks here and taking this seriously. It's made a difference. If we had 65 people test positive in Connecticut yesterday, there were 3,600 in Arizona. And it just gives you an idea of what is going on in other parts of the country. And Texas just had to close down their bars. Texas, go figure. Because they said bars are obviously a place where the infections are steep. So I love what the folks behind me here have been able to help put together, Pastor, with your help. Our churches, our remote testing facility from Optimus, and bringing testing to the community, bringing testing to you, making it easier to get tested. No questions asked, don't need a symptom. Please come and get tested. No cost. If you are found to be positive, we'll find a place for you to stay. The testing is not just about making sure you're safe, but making sure that your community is safe and your family is safe. And Pastor Bennett, we couldn't do it without outreach from the churches and the partnership we have with the churches to convince the congregation this is what you can do. This is what you can do safely. Force CT is here. Force CT, Ted Yang, is major philanthropic effort. It's volunteers, not-for-profit dollars contributed to help churches like this be able to set up a remote testing facility and keep this going. So anyway, from the bottom of my heart, look, I'm looking around the rest of the country right now. I see the country which is flaring up in a lot of other states right now, and that's not true of Connecticut. And the only thing I would ask is my friend Dick Blumenthal, you've been on the right side of every one of these issues from the very beginning, but now get your old friend Mitch McConnell to the table and tell the senator that now is the time for us to get the HEROES Act passed. And Mayor Ganim and I know better than anybody else. We need to know what the federal government's going to do for state and local government so that I can put together a budget, so that Joe can put together a budget, so everybody knows what to expect for the coming year. You promise me you'll tell that to Mitch?
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, since the governor issued that challenge, now I get to speak. First of all, very seriously, I want to thank the governor for his leadership. He has been at the forefront nationally of making Connecticut safer and providing a real example of leadership. I brag about Connecticut all the time. And if you need a picture, and a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is it. This is it. The community coming together to make Connecticut safer. Thank you to Pastor Bennett and every one of the churches, there are 21 of them around the state of Connecticut, involved in 4CT. They're going to have these testing facilities. When people say to me, what is the answer? Testing, testing, testing. More face masks, hand washing, all of the listening to scientists. Yes, we believe in science, which means testing and tracing. That's what will enable us to conquer this pandemic. So I want to thank all the local officials, Mayor Ganem and his team, all the city council members, our colleagues in the state legislature. And let me just say this in response to the governor's challenge. Mitch McConnell is abandoning America. He is abrogating his responsibility. He should be bringing the HEROES Act to the floor of the United States Senate on Monday. He should have brought it 2 weeks ago. And I say to Mitch McConnell, you can quote me, we should stay in session over this 4th of July recess. We should be going nowhere except the nation's capital to deal with this pandemic. Pass the HEROES Act, amend it. Okay, maybe it's not the final answer, but let's give us a vote. Let's give us a chance to move forward because it includes $75 billion for more testing. That's right, $75 billion with a B. Tell Mitch McConnell, stay in the Capitol. Go nowhere for a July recess until you pass it. Now, let me just make one last point here. Folks have been marching in the streets. They have been crying out for justice. They've been demanding real reform with teeth on law enforcement. Yesterday, the House passed a bill that ought to be a blueprint in the United States Senate for real reform, not the lip service or the partisan talking points that Mitch McConnell put on the floor this past week. And we voted it down because every major civil rights organization and every civil rights leader said, no, this is not real reform. But when we're talking about justice, let's talk about law enforcement justice, policing justice. Let's also talk about healthcare justice, because this pandemic has fallen disproportionately on communities of color, on poor communities, on black and brown communities. They have borne the brunt of this pandemic. This testing facility is a small step, a small beginning step toward healthcare justice and environmental justice, eliminating some of the contaminants and pollution that cause those pre-existing conditions that make these communities more vulnerable to this pandemic. So what you have here is a community coming together for healthcare justice, environmental justice, policing justice, yes. But let's step forward together and let's send that message to Mitch McConnell. Do your job. Do your job. And do it for communities of color, but for the whole country, because that is what America is demanding in our streets and communities today. Thank you very much.
At this time, we'll have words from our mayor, Joe Ganem.
Thank you. Pastor, to you and to Mount Airy, thank you for your spiritual leadership, but your community leadership and the partnership and leadership on this. Testing. We know it saves lives. It helps us make the progress that we've made. We were, at one point, the governor called me and said, gee, Joe, the cases in Bridgeport have spiked tremendously months ago. Now I'm happy to report that we've had the largest decline of any community in the state and beyond for active coronavirus cases. Because of community leadership, Pastor, because of your leadership, Governor, Senator, to you, all of our legislative, and because people who get it. And we've got to keep that message going in Connecticut and in Bridgeport and in this part of the country. The Governor, your actions recently are appreciated. We see what's happened in other parts of the country. We want to keep our cases low. We want to keep people alive and healthy. That's what this is about. the expansion by the churches, to allowing your benevolence to allow the churches to participate. 6, I believe, in Bridgeport, 6 or 7 in Bridgeport, and 20, I think you said 21, Senator, across Connecticut, are a huge step in the way to expand testing. So I'm glad to be a part of that. Let's keep it going. Let's keep our city and our state, and I hope our nation as well, safe. Senator, thank you for your leadership in Washington. To our delegation, thank you for your leadership in Hartford. Governor, thank you for being here, all that you do. Pastor, I'll give it back to you. Thank you so much.
At this time, we'll have words from Senator Marilyn Moore, who helped to coordinate this event.
So good afternoon. I listened to Senator Blumenthal and what he said, that this is a small step on other things, but this is a very tiny step in what needs to happen in the way of testing. As the numbers were very high in Stamford and other places, the numbers were very low in Bridgeport in the early days, and I think it gave people a sense of security that was false. And then we saw the numbers grow. We have the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the state of Connecticut. So I'm happy that we're here now, but I always try to speak the truth. We've come a little late, but it's not too late to make a difference. And so it's important that we get this message out to everyone. Just because you think you're not sick, or just because you don't have all the symptoms, don't think that you're not a carrier and that you cannot pass it on. I have been on the phone for the past 60 days, 3 times a week, talking to the Department of Social Services, Department of Public Health, and the governor's staff, trying to get screening into the urban centers. When you look at the infection rates in Bridgeport, you see them concentrated around Bridgeport Hospital and St. Vincent's Hospital. In those areas, there are 3-family, multifamily homes. Any place where there is density, there is the opportunity for this virus to spread. So not only do we need to come to the churches, we need to go out into the community. I think this is the beginning of what we need to do. I'm glad that we're doing pop-ups all over the city to make them available. But we've got to go into the community. The same way we have to do that for the census, the same way we have to do that when we get ready to do the tracing. You must go into the communities of color and reach out to the families and educate them why it's important for them to be tested. And then I want to say I'm glad to see 4CT here, because this is a financial burden on the churches or anybody who's hosting. I know that the federally qualified health centers receive close to $500,000 from the federal government to do testings. That money needs to make it down into our communities. That is what the fight is really about, that you're hearing about the racial tension. The money doesn't make it down to the ground where the people are doing the work. So my next initiative beyond this is to make sure that the churches and the communities that are supporting these efforts, that it doesn't become a financial burden on them. Because you have to remember, the churches have been closed. People are maybe tithing, but the people who would come in and drop the money in the basket are not here. But this building has to still go on, and they still have to function, and people still have to be paid. So I want to make sure through 4CT that that is a consideration as we move forward. And then again, I want to say to people, ask your family members, have they been tested? Bring them to a testing, and then follow up to find out what your results are. And if you need to quarantine and isolate yourself, do that. But thank you, Pastor Bennett. Thank you, Governor, for getting here to do this. And I really do appreciate that we are doing the testings, because it's going to make a difference. If there is a surge, and everybody says there might be another surge, we need to be prepared for the next one. This was a pandemic that nobody knew how to deal with. I think for the most part, people did the best they could in many places. But there will not be an excuse if there is a surge why we don't do better. Thank you.